Hey y'all. So I wanted to discuss fact checking because I've been noticing there's been a lot of disputes lately, especially now that Meta has announced that they are effectively changing the their policy regarding fact checking to not have fact checking anymore, except they are going to add something in its place. They're going to try and bring in community notes, which is a common utility on Twitter, on X, it's now called X, and it's been on X since well before Elon Musk took over the running of the platform. So, this is obviously, depending on who you ask, it's a big deal, it's a little deal. But I wanted to give my thoughts on it because I realize that as someone who is more on the liberal side of things, you could say maybe rhetorically a little conservative, but generally speaking, in terms of ideals, in terms of values, on the more liberal side of things. As someone in that group, I've noticed a lot of other more liberally minded folks have, they've been very, angry about this. And there's kind of been just this focusing on how, a lot of what we see today with the fact checking is a problem. And, I've seen a lot of content about this. I've seen a lot of YouTube videos that have touched on it. There was a video that I believe his name is Carlos Maza made, in which he has his own YouTube channel because he's not able to really portray himself as the gay Marxist in his work for I believe it's Vox he does work for. But he's able to do that on his own personal platform. But yeah, he basically kind of tore into why he thinks Trumpism has seemingly made these really conservative ideas look normal, and how he's seemingly made the idea of truth kind of fall out of popularity. And my feeling is that this isn't really where the concern should be placed. The concern should be placed in that people are listening to specific things that Trump says. To me, this kind of aversion to the notion of to the notion of impartiality, this aversion to the notion of not doing fact checking in certain locations. See, the thing with fact checking, right, is that it is a great tool for establishing certain things that you think have been left out, making sure that different populations are doing or are seeing really what you believe to be the truth in a situation. And, there's been this sort of aversion to this idea of everyone has their own truth. I don't necessarily agree that there is that truth is that subjective. I wouldn't say that if you asked me, right, did January 6th happen? I would believe that just truthfully, yes, it did happen. Do I think that it was, do I think that that's really what we're seeing the fact checking like today? No. Today we're seeing a lot of things that are very politically contentious, things that are very politically opinionated in our society, and they're being treated as facts. And I listen, I understand that from someone like my perspective, it is just really very true to me, to the point of almost being factual, that what Trump did on January 6th was problematic. It was very, very problematic, and it kind of went against some important precedents in our country's existence, in its history. It's also true to me that, like, you know, there wasn't really enough evidence of electoral fraud to warrant there being this idea of massive fraud, you know, because Trump had to rhetorically say, you know, there's massive amounts of fraud, because otherwise it wouldn't be substantial enough to warrant, yeah, the 2020 election was actually, I actually won it. And, you know, Trump, again, I don't know whether he actually believes that he won that election, but from my understanding, ever since then, people have kind of taken that to mean that they need to fact check more. And let's be real here. There's been political disputes like this in the past, and people have had different ideas of what the facts are about the situation. They've had different opinions about what has happened. The idea that we're fact checking that, oh, there is no evidence for electoral fraud, the matter of what there is and is not evidence for is not, you know, you're stating a matter of opinion that you think the evidence that someone who is sort of this, just because it hasn't really been its own court case, it's been a matter of several court cases and several debates and all that, right? If you look at the debate over the 2020 election as a plaintiff-defendant situation, where the defendant is basically the whole electoral system and the plaintiff is Donald Trump, you're looking at it from the perspective of, it would be like if you were fact-checking the plaintiff's evidence. And again, this isn't the job of the judge. The judge, the overseeing society, it doesn't have the role, especially the media. I don't think journalists have the role of fact-checking what politicians say. And the reason I don't think that is because I think it gets into, it creates this narrative where now there's this expectation of people to believe certain things. And it becomes a slippery slope, because as soon as you as a media organization realize that you can fact check this thing like, you know, there is no evidence of electoral fraud, right? As soon as you say that, you can very easily be accused of bias, but then you can very easily, just because you know that it's rhetorically biased, you know that you can then go ahead and go further with it and fact check essentially everything they're saying. You can, at that point, right? At that point, it becomes a matter of now, go ahead and fact check the economic policies. Fact check certain beliefs about economic policies. Be like, actually, there's never been any statistical evidence to suggest that this policy works. If you're going to fact check claims about electoral situations, right, that campaigns are making, you have to fact check everything. You can't have some of it, but not all of it. It's why fact checking should not occur in debates. I'm kind of a little more iffy in certain other areas. I do think there's some utility for it in some places, but fact-checking in presidential debates is asinine to me, in my opinion. It's totally bonkers, because you're having a debate between two different folks, and let's be honest, there's been this sort of coddling of the Democrats lately. Sort of coddling, because people there's not enough expectation for them to be good, for them to actually get the votes of people, for them to actually get the support of people. There's this expectation that, oh yeah, you know, they're the ones in the right, so therefore we have to coddle them to the top. No, like they have to win. They have to win for us. They have to be successful. They have to prove themselves to us. They can't just run on this notion that we're not the Republicans. Look how bad the Republicans are. And it's something about the two-party system that has really pissed me off. But to try to get back on point, my point is that what we're seeing in American politics these days is this notion of fact-checking during presidential debates, where not everything is fact-checked, right? Not everything is, but then some things are. And that's a problem, because that inherently brings about bias. That inherently brings an element of bias into it. When you are someone who is who is doing a debate, who is like sort of acting as the moderator. I believe that moderators of debates are there to keep the conversation civil and going. I do not think they're there to implement the opinions of the news organization or what the news organization even knows onto the public. And it's not what a debate is for. And this doesn't just go for presidential debates, it goes for all political debates. If the political opponent wants to suggest, hey, go do your research, go look up the validity of what my opponent is saying right now, right? If they want to do that, go ahead and do that. But, you know, this idea of fact-checking, it's not going to get some of these people that you expect to have confirmation bias. It's not like that person that, you know, because I know the response to have the political opponent, have the Democrat tell the voters to go look up what the Republican is saying and verify it. I know the response to that argument will be, well, they're just going to have confirmation bias and not believe what sources the Democratic candidate is using. Well, yeah, but at that rate, a fact check from the fucking moderators who are supposed to be impartial is not going to do anything. It's going to only make it worse. So, like, if that's our solution, that's a really shitty solution. There is pretty much zero net benefit for me to having fact-checking during debates, but that's during debates. Outside of debates on social media platforms, I think the notion of having community notes makes sense, because I think the notion of the community notes, of the community coming together and saying, this is what, you know, the evidence says to us, this is what this means. Like, I think that's good. But it also, even then, it points to the failure that we have established of, like, what social media is encouraging. It's not encouraging people to have conscientious debates that include people exchanging information and talking to each other like human beings. It doesn't include that. And a big part of that is that the media organizations that control these social media platforms, they don't care. They make money off of people being angry and being active on their platform by spewing insults at each other. They make money off of this stuff, and it's why a lot of the most, you know, vicious stuff you see on these platforms, it doesn't get removed. You have to, you know, somebody has to report it several times for it to get removed. And the reason is that they really don't like to remove, you know, I don't think they like to remove polarizing stuff, because I think it furthers their sort of, I guess you could say, agenda of having people be tense, having people be competitive, because that ultimately keeps their platform active. And so, you know, yeah, I'm really not, I really, like, I think it's more of the fact that we need community notes, I think, is a testament to how much of a failure our society has been with social media. I mean, yeah, and I think, again, moving away from fact-checking and to community notes, I think is a good move by Meta, because it tells the public, like, hey, we're leaving this concept of fact-checking up to you. We're leaving it to you. We aren't going to be doing it from our perspective and inserting our views of what the facts are into every single situation. It's, you know, it's no matter what you do, if you as this organization that is like a very famous organization like Meta, right? There's going to be people politically who are going to go after you. And those people are going to have a lot of ammo if you just keep doing exactly what they're saying you're doing. If you keep fact-checking everything they're saying. Like, again, what is really the goal here? To call them out on their bullshit? Because calling them out on their bullshit very clearly has had no impact on elections. It has had zero impact on getting people to vote a different way, getting people to vote differently. There is this combative, very hostile nature to how we're approaching things like Trumpism in this country. And it is so ineffective. It is so shitty. It is doing absolutely nothing. We've just seen Donald Trump elected for the second time. And if you ask a lot of Democrats and you ask them, like, hey, are you funding these people in Republican primaries? Do you actually want to see the Republican Party change? If they're being honest with you, they'll tell you no, because the Democratic Party benefits from this. They benefit from having an opponent that a lot of people really, really dislike. They would much rather have a bunch of Donald Trumps running the Republican Party than a bunch of Chris Sununu's. They would much rather have a bunch of people who come across as so disgusting and so just unacceptable and unelectable. They would much rather have those people up against their candidates than actually have to promote their candidates and make them win. And to me, you know, the national Democratic establishment for that, like, I just don't have a lot of respect for it. I've lost a lot of respect for it. And it's probably why I just can't associate myself with that party. I can't call myself a Democrat because as much as I agree with a lot of the things that they stand for, they are so shitty at getting them done. They just inflame the other side. They actively promote candidacies that they know will inflame the other side. And then they whine and complain when it backfires and those campaigns actually win, when those Trumpists actually succeed. And so I think 2024 really, it has to wake Democrats up. It has to tell these partisan figures, like, hey, what we're doing with this party, the way this party is being run right now, is terrible. It is not working for the American people, right? Not proposing anything like RCV, like substantial campaign finance reform. Not pushing through any of these things in the last 4 years. Not pushing for any of this kind of stuff when Obama was in power. It's a degree of just like a terrible mistake after terrible mistake, missed opportunity after missed opportunity that people are fed up with now. You know, you had 2 presidents that could have feasibly gotten a lot of these more progressive things done. Bill Clinton, Jimmy Carter, you can argue those 2, they were more on the conservative Southern side. They just probably wouldn't have agreed with a lot of these things. But again, like even then, I think most conservatives, honestly, if you asked them and like explained to them really what RCV was, really what campaign finance reform meant, they would be on board with it. But again, like a lot of these election results, like what happened in 2022 Alaska, where ranked choice voting effectively helped the Democrat win that race. You know, I mean, you can't tell Republicans that it wasn't RCV and that it was actually the fact that Sarah Palin was a shit candidate, because they just won't believe you. There just won't be any recognition of that fact. The reality is that RCV means for a lot of these characters on the more radical sides of things, they actually have to convince people of their beliefs. They can't just use this spoiler effect nonsense to force people to vote for their ideas. There has to actually be some campaigning to do. And yeah, I'm going to stand here and I'm going to continue talking about this, and I'm going to continue complaining about the fact that we have first past the post instead of RCV, because it is one of the biggest threats facing our country. Trump, to me, as I said on Discord a few days ago, he never represented the rise of fascism in America. He never represented this rise of like some extremist ideology, but he represented the reality that it very much can if we don't do something about the way we elect our politicians. It has absolutely nothing to do with the mindset of 77 million Americans. I guarantee you don't have 70 million fascists living in your country. And if you do, you should probably leave. It's probably a bad country at that point. But again, like the fact that people just want to look at every other thing except for the Democratic establishment, except at, you know, the way our election system works. The fact that everyone wants to focus on every single other thing, except for something that we might be able to get tens of millions of Americans to agree on, you know, it's so infuriating. And part of it is because there is a degree of benefit that the Democratic Party gets from Trump being on top of the Republican Party. There just is. It's just a reality. It's not like, you know, because like those candidates are easier to beat than Democrats. And that's starting to become less and less the case. Democrats have allowed this shift to occur and they've actively funded it, like objectively so. They have funded these campaigns. You know, they've allowed it to happen. And now there's the repercussions that are happening. But they know they won't ever get the blame because the blame will always, I mean, rightfully so again, mostly be on the people that are actually advocating these policies, these candidates, these politicians. The blame won't ever be on the people that allowed it to happen, that in some cases furthered it happening sooner. In a lot of cases, there won't be any blame on the Democratic Party for not advocating substantially, right, with actual meaning behind their words for a better Republican Party. Because as much as there's that clip that, Nancy Pelosi telling all those people in the crowd, I want a strong Republican Party, she doesn't give a fuck about that, because her political action committee funded those very same Trumpist Republicans. This is a fact. Look it up. She defended it. So, I guess, and again, if there's any Trumpists watching this video, I guess my thing to you would be, that there are people out here that, aren't being fooled by this, partisan thing. But then again, breaking away from the partisan thing, it involves acknowledging that, yeah, we got to have some kind of discussion here involving people that are willing to put aside their feelings about Trump and about, Biden and the Democrats and all that. There needs to be some movement for us to have certain policies that will allow things to get better and will force things in some regard to get somewhat better. And so, yeah, I realize it's kind of pushed away from the topic of fact-checking and more onto the normal rambles I've had. But again, this all relates back to fact-checking, because again, this is not if they really cared about doing what was going to be effective at challenging these conservative Republican ideas, they wouldn't be doing things that are just so inherently unpopular. They wouldn't be doing things that they know aren't working, that have no tangible benefit. They wouldn't be doing these things. It's the fact that they don't really care about that is the reason why their motives are not what people think. And the people who go out on the streets and campaign vote blue no matter who, listen, I get it. I get that there are policies that Republicans are promoting that you don't want to even take the chance of that making its way into government. But the reality is that it's happening, and it's happening because we haven't changed anything that we're doing. We just keep, and I'm scared that nothing's going to change. In 2028, the Democrats are going to be shocked to find that Americans have actually found more support in, voting for Republicans. I'm scared about that. And I feel like the things that I want out of politics, there's a better chance of the Democrats getting them done than the Republicans. I think there's a very low chance that Trump in the next 2 years is going to implement RCV or implement, campaign finance reform. I highly doubt it. Trumpists, if you want to, try and convince me that Trump will get that done, sure. But I'm pretty sure, and I'm telling you this, I'm pretty sure in the next 2 years, nothing of that kind that's going to fix our elections and fix the way we do politics in this country, none of it's going to change. And I wouldn't blame you, because honestly, what you've been doing has worked for you. It's clearly gotten you now a second presidency with this specific ideology at play. But, to me, there has to be at some point, some time where we come together as a country. We just look at this first past the post system, this idea of how Democrats are running their campaigns. And at least we as Democrats acknowledge, and again, I'm not a Democrat, but I'm saying this because I lean towards the Democrats. We acknowledge this is a shit way of doing politics. It just is. It doesn't appeal to people. It doesn't make people feel represented. It doesn't make people feel like you are not out of touch. Again, I get the feeling from a lot of people that whatever party they dislike, they just consider to be more out of touch. That's their main central grievance with that party. And there's nothing being done by really either party to try and change that. The Republicans can't really change that because they're dealing with such a, big character like Donald Trump. And the Democrats just won't do that, because I don't know why the fuck not. I don't know why they will just admit when the economy is, yes, good, but it's something that Americans still don't like, because there's still a lot of flaws. Everyone's feeling poorer now than they did 4 years ago. It doesn't matter that, oh yeah, the GDP raised by 2 points. I'm so happy for you. Guess what? Americans feel so much poorer. And instead of acknowledging that and of campaigning on that, there was this campaign on everything's okay, right? Would you change anything that Joe Biden did? No, I wouldn't. Are you going to do anything differently? Probably not. Like, to me, yes. The Democrats caused the 2024 elections. It wasn't even like in 2022, you could argue Trumpism wasn't popular enough yet to make that happen. Now it is 100% like Democrats, like they had one of the most chaotic House of Representatives in American history with the whole Kevin McCarthy thing. And they still managed to dominate the elections. Dominate. Again, in American terms, they dominated. To win a trifecta because the Democrats these days at the federal level, and again, I'm not referring to like my local friends, the politicians I know locally. I have my own separate grievances about local Democrats and local and state Democrats and all that. I'm talking specifically about federal Democrats, like just like stupidity and inability to be appealing is baffling to me, because I know they know there's better ways to do this. And I haven't really figured out, I just think it's partisan interests that are making the Democrats not do enough. That's really the only thing I can think of. And so, yeah, I need to see more than two options at some point in one of these elections, because it's getting annoying.